Okay, hello and welcome. Just making sure everything is set up properly. Hello. We'll give everyone a few minutes to join. I have you right here on my tablet so I can see what you're typing. Remember, throughout today's practice, I'll be checking in. So if you need a different variation, or if what I'm offering isn't working for you, let me know. And I'll go ahead and offer other alternatives. Have to excuse me, a little bit of a cough today. It's been really dry here. I'm in Toronto and it got cold again. So the weather shift is having an effect. But um, today, our props. I'm sitting on a bolster, but you can have a bolster. If you don't have a bolster, don't worry. Basically, this lovely pile of blankets I have here will help us get all of the support that we need. So if you don't have a bolster, you can grab a bunch of blankets. You can grab a few firmer pillows are probably a little bit better. We'll also be using yoga blocks. And if you don't have blocks, again, don't worry. We have other options, maybe a few throw pillows or a few extra blankets, a few extra pillows. The more props you have, the more support we're going to be able to offer ourselves, and the more options we'll have to be comfortable in our asana or posture. So I also have an eye pillow. This might be really helpful if you know it's kind of bright where you are. Um, we'll usually use it as we come into each posture. Our first posture is side lying, so it'd be hard to keep this on the face. But the second posture, we're reclined a bit, so it'll help keep light out and also put a little bit of pressure across this part of the face, which helps us sink a little bit deeper into that parasympathetic nervous response or rest and digest. So we have a few more minutes. If you like, you can find a comfortable seated position, maybe on our bolster or on a pillow, especially if you deal with like sciatica, because sometimes sitting directly on the floor can cause that to flare. Or if you're like me and you have a larger belly, being able to sit on the bolster allows the hips to be a bit higher and gives us more space for the belly. If you're comfortable sitting cross-legged, feel free. I like to sit in Baddha Konasana or butterfly, feet together, knees apart. Gives me lots of space for the belly. So I can pull the belly in between the legs and find a nice, straight, supported spine. If you're more comfortable being reclined right now, you can also be reclined. I just want to remind everyone that all of the options I'll be giving today are just that, options. If they don't feel great for you, let me know. I can suggest something else. Or if you know what you'd rather, what asana or position you would rather come into, you can feel free to do that. You have the agency to do what feels good in your body. A lot of our um, a lot of our practice is really finding out what works for us in the way that we live, in the way that our body is. So we want to support that as much as possible. I'm just checking to make sure that there aren't any questions. Okay, sorry. Thought I saw a question. It was just my own comment. Uh, these lives are so hard to get used to. But we'll go ahead and start getting set up for our pranayama. And as folks join, they can join. So we'll start with the grounding. Well, let me start by introducing myself for anyone who's new. Hello, my name is Shannon. My pronouns are they, them, and I am a fat accessible yoga instructor. Um, and I wanted to offer this series for long COVID because I have a lot of clients who are dealing with long COVID. I've taken an extra training. I've also done a fair amount of research and reading medical papers to see what supports and how they're connected. So I want to make sure that everyone has access to anything that might help them during this time. We're still learning so much about long COVID. And if you don't have long COVID and you're joining us, that's great, because this practice is a restorative practice, which is good for everyone. Oh, thank you. So we're going to start by finding a comfortable seated position. Again, if you're more comfortable being reclined, you can be reclined. You'll have to come back up for the pranayama or breath work if that's something you want to participate in. So again, I'm sitting on a bolster so that I have some support behind my bum and along my spine, but you can be seated directly on the mat if that's comfortable, or in your chair, or of course you can always practice in bed as well. We'll find our comfortable seated position, and we'll start by taking a moment to notice our surroundings. We also might notice any sounds in the space. So I'm in a city, so through my window and through your speakers, you might hear car horns, sirens, but notice what's happening in your space as well. And then when we're ready, if we like, we might find a soft gaze or close our eyes if that's comfortable. And we might take a few deep breaths, maybe in through the nose, out through the mouth, if that's something that we are comfortable with today. Maybe releasing on the exhale with a sigh or vocalization. Doing our best to let go of the day, let go of the week, the month, the year, whatever it is we need to let go of. And after we've taken as many of these breaths as we need, we can find our natural breath, whatever that looks like. We might start to notice the areas of the body that are making contact with the mat, the floor, bed, chair, bolster. Noticing the sensation in these areas, whether we feel a difference in pressure, a difference in temperature. And we'll allow ourselves to ground down. So noticing that connection, and maybe noticing how that connection goes through the object that we're resting against, down through the floor, all the way down into the earth beneath us, no matter how far beneath us it is today. Noticing the unconditional support that the earth provides, and allowing ourselves to truly rest against this support. Allowing ourselves to be heavy, allowing ourselves to be held, allowing ourselves to let go against this support. We might take a moment and notice if we're kind of actively holding ourselves up. So maybe if we're holding tension in the jaw, we might find a little bit of space in the biting surfaces of the mouth. We might let the shoulders be heavy, falling away from the ears. Let the arms be heavy, resting against the floor of the body. We might notice if we're holding the belly in. If so, maybe taking a deep breath, feeling the belly expand. Letting the hips be heavy, the legs, the feet. Giving ourselves a few moments to come to rest. And as we rest against this unconditional support that the earth provides, we might bring our attention back to the breath. Noticing the inhale and the exhale without changing anything. We might notice if we're breathing more in through the nose or mouth. No wrong answers. We might notice if we're breathing into the heart space or the belly. We might notice where else in the body we feel the movement of the breath, maybe through the shoulders, the ribs, the back. You might not feel it anywhere else, and that's okay too. We're not judging, we're witnessing what we're feeling in this moment. And when we're ready, if we're comfortable, we might start to slowly alter the breath. So if we, excuse me, if we haven't been breathing through the nose, we might see if we can breathe in and out through the nose. And if we're congested, no worries, we can breathe through the mouth as well. And if that feels comfortable, we might see if we can bring the breath down into the belly, down into the diaphragm. So maybe bringing the hands against the belly. And on our inhale, noticing the belly expand. And on the exhale, release and soften. And we might notice after the belly fills, maybe we can take in a little bit more air and fill through the ribs as well, through the heart space as well. Inhaling into the belly, the ribs, the heart space. And on the exhale, releasing the heart space, the ribs, and the belly. Continuing again, inhaling belly, ribs, heart space. Exhaling heart space, ribs, belly. This is our 3-part wave breath. And this is the breath that we'll be noticing throughout our practice as we come into asana. Noticing how full the capacity of the lungs can be. Breathing at a pace that's comfortable for us. If we've started reclined, we might slowly bring a little bit of movement into the body, roll onto the right or left side, and come to seated. As we continue to breathe, we're going to be moving into our pranayama or breath work. So we were just practicing 3-part wave or Dirgha pranayama, and this will be coming back to throughout our practice. But today we're going to look particularly at Nadi Shodhana, or alternate nostril breathing. So Nadi Shodhana has been practiced since, I believe, around the 15th century within yoga. But there's been a lot of medical research that's also been done where they refer to it as alternate nostril breathing. And it talks about how this particular breath work does help support the heart and cardiovascular system. In fact, a lot of cardiac patients will be taught how to breathe in Nadi Shodhana, or how to practice Nadi Shodhana. So I'm going to give a brief overview and then we'll practice together. And one thing I would like to note is that feel free to change the position of the legs. You're not frozen in one position. We don't want anything to go numb. So if you need to open the legs or change the position, please feel free. So we start by, again, noticing our breath, noticing the inhale and exhale. And if we can, with most of our pranayama, we're going to breathe in and out through the nose. Now, with the Nadi Shodhana, we'll be actually closing one nostril, actually both nostrils sometimes, one nostril most of the time, and alternating the nostril through which we're inhaling and exhaling. So with it, we have two different ways that we can do that, two different hand postures. We can start with the first finger and ring middle finger together. The thumb will go against the right nostril, and the ring finger and pinky go against the left nostril. I'm going to turn to the side so you can see. So the first finger and middle finger go against the point between the eyebrows, very gently resting, just as an anchor. And then we can close both nostrils by pinching both sides. Then we release the right nostril, inhale. Close both nostrils, exhale through the left. We'll inhale again through the left. Close both nostrils and release through the right. So at the top of the breath, we have a natural pause. And during that pause, both nostrils will be closed. We're going to breathe in through the right, out through the left, then again in through the left, out through the right. So if this position doesn't feel comfortable, you can also use the pinky and thumb in kind of a shaka-like position. So whichever is more comfortable. It's hard to see opening and closing a little far, but whichever way to close off the airway is possible. And if after a few breaths you start to feel like, I don't really like this, release the hands, release the breath, and come back to our wave breath, if that's comfortable for you. So again, finding our comfortable position, noticing the inhale, the exhale. And if we're congested and we try this and we're not really able to get any breath, again, come back to the 3-part breath. So starting with whatever hand position feels good, we'll bring this up. We'll start again just by breathing in and out through the nose if that's comfortable. And then when we're ready, at the top of the breath, we'll pinch the nose, open the thumb, inhale through the right, pinch, and exhale through the left. We'll inhale through the left, pinch, and exhale through the right. Inhale, and exhale opposite. Inhale, same. Pinch, exhale opposite. Inhale, pinch, exhale opposite. Inhale, pinch, exhale opposite. We'll continue on our own, inhaling, pinching, and exhaling through the opposite nostril before inhaling again. When we're ready to release, after exhaling on the left nostril, we can release the hand, come back to breathing in and out through the nose. Take a moment to notice if we notice any difference. If we do have a little sinus congestion, sometimes this also can clear it a little bit. And then when we're ready, returning to again our natural breath. We'll get ready to enter our first supported posture. So again, Nadi Shodhana, we can practice several times a day if we like, usually for around 20 to 30 cycles. So just 20 to 30 breaths can be really helpful, again, for our cardiovascular health, as well as engaging the parasympathetic nervous response. So again, moving out of fight or flight into rest and digest, which again is a really beneficial aspect of restorative yoga altogether. So for our first posture today, we are going to be coming into side lying stretch. So we have a few different ways that we can come into this, a few different options, depending on our props. I'm going to bring my bolster down near the bottom of my mat so that I have the option to use this for support if I need it. I might not need it, but it's always better to have. I'm going to have one or both blocks near the top of my mat again so that I have options. If you don't have a bolster, extra pillow, blanket, even a yoga blocks might be enough support. You can split this up and have one block down here or an extra pillow. And I'm going to come to my large collection of blankets, and I am going to grab one of my larger blankets if we have options. And I'm going to make this into a roll that's going to go underneath my side. And so for this, I'm going to start with it in what we would call a rectangle fold because, well, it looks a bit like a rectangle. And we're going to take the longer end of the rectangle and roll our blanket. And it's about this big, depending on the size of your blanket. So this is meant to support our side under our natural rest as we recline, our natural waist, as we recline, not recline, but lie on our side. So I have a bit more space between my waist and the floor because I have larger hips and thighs. So I'm going to add another blanket to this to make it bigger. You might not need to. I do. So, and if we like, we can also use a bolster, but that might be a little too much for some folks. Here we go. So this is about right for me. So I've got two blankets rolled together, and I'm going to bring this across the mat at about the center of the mat. I'm going to position myself a little bit south of center of the mat, and I have my blocks down here at the bottom of the mat. I'm going to grab a couple more blankets. I'm going to move my other blanket out of the way. And if you're somewhere chilly, please cover yourself with a blanket. The more relaxed we are and the warmer our muscles are, the more we're going to be able to ease into the stretch. But I'm going to take my two of my blankets and I'm going to bring them up here as support for my head. The other thing you can use is a block, maybe a block with a blanket on it for a little bit of softness, or of course a couple pillows. Anything you need here. Notice I still have one block at the top, or a pillow, something at the top, so that I have something I can rest my hand on, which we'll see in a moment. So I have my roll, I have my bolster, I have my head support, and I have possible arm support. What I'm going to do now is I am going to slowly lean over my blanket roll here. And I'm going to try to position this beneath the waist, so just above the hip, below the ribs. And I'm going to slowly come down onto my forearm. Now, if we like, we can have the legs stacked with maybe a bend in the knee, or we can have them extended, whatever's more comfortable. I'm going to bring my right arm, or the arm that's against the mat, forward. And then I'm going to rest my head against the head support. I'm going to try to stay completely on my side without bringing the shoulder or body forward or back. I'm going to bring my arm along the length of the body and take a moment here. Make sure that my blanket roll is in the right position. Make sure I don't feel anything pinched. I might feel a bit of stretch, maybe through the outside of the hip, through the side ribs, through the lower abdomen, into the ribs. That's okay. That's kind of what we're looking for here. We're trying to open up the side body so that we can get a bit more opening through the lateral portion of the lungs. If the legs don't feel supported, that's where our bolster or block comes in. We can bring a leg forward, rest it against that. And then our final step is to take our top arm, bring it up overhead. We can have it resting over the head against the ground. But if you're like me and you have larger upper arms, this might be a little bit too much pressure on the head. So that's where our second block comes in, so that we can rest our arm against that block so it's not quite as much pressure on the head and on the neck. And here we are in our lateral side stretch. And we're going to be here for about 3 to 4 minutes. So again, taking a few deep breaths in and out through the nose if that's comfortable. And we might come back for a 3-part wave breath, filling the belly, filling the ribs, filling the heart space. Exhaling, releasing the heart space, the ribs, the belly. And we might notice sensation of that breath through the side body. And remember, if this does not feel comfortable, feel free to type in the chat and I can offer some variations. We want to let ourselves rest, relax, really count on the support of the props so the rest of the body can release and let go.
And when we're ready, we'll slowly come back to the breath, noticing the inhale and exhale. We might bring the overhead arm down along the body. If we have our leg on a support, we might bring it back towards the mat. We'll bring the top hand down towards the mat for support and slowly begin to press up onto our forearm, giving ourselves a few moments along the way to acclimate, and then slowly pressing up from here. We're going to start on the opposite side now. So if you like, you can roll over and face the opposite direction. Or if it's easier, we can rebuild our props on the opposite side of the mat, which is what I'll do so I can stay facing y'all. So when we're ready, again, coming onto the opposite side. Bringing ourselves down onto the forearm. Again, we want to make sure that we have that support under the natural waist, so we might need a little bit of adjustment. We do tend to be asymmetric in our bodies, so it might take a little bit more finessing to find it here. And remember to bring your arm support with you if you need it. And we'll slowly stretch out the reclined arm. Again, we might need to position our head support a little differently to make sure that it feels comfortable. And when we're ready, we can lift our arm overhead. So again, continuing here for the next 4 minutes or so. Again, noticing the breath. Noticing the expansion of this side of the body as we continue to breathe and release against the support of the props. When we're ready, we'll come back to the breath. We can bring our arm back down along our side. If we have our leg on the support, we can return it to the mat. Bring the top hand down to the front of the mat and slowly press up. Again, taking our time. Coming up to a seated position. Beautiful. So from here, we're going to enter our second position. So our first position, we were working on opening the sides of the body and the lateral portions of the lung. Now we're going to come into a gentle back bend for a bit of heart opening. So again, we have options depending on where we are, depending on our own mobility, depending on our own bodies. So first, we're going to take blanket roll. I'm going to take the smaller inner portion of my blanket roll. This is good if you are unfamiliar with back bends or don't practice them often. This might be a really good option for you. If you do practice them often, and maybe you need a little bit more, then maybe we can add our second blanket. Or if we practice them all the time, we might even choose to use a bolster. Or maybe, I would say a bolster or the rolls, because we're looking for the placement along a very particular part of the spine. This is going to go just under the shoulder blades. So the shoulder blades kind of come to the bottom. They have this curve in them. It's going to go right across the bottom of that. So we're going to bring this to, I'd say, a little bit north of the center of the mat, so we have space. We're going to take either our bolster or our maybe another rolled blanket or a few pillows, and those are going to go beneath the knees to support the knees. And so this is a variation of supported fish. It's sometimes called heart opener or blanket in 3 places, and this is one of the places. So depending on what style of yoga you practice, it's going to have a lot of different names. We also might want to have our eye pillow handy. So once we have all of this in position, we'll bring our bolster or roll or anything that we need beneath the knees. So I'm going to start by reclining first and then bringing my legs over because I have lipedema and it's difficult for me to sit upright and raise my legs onto my bolster. But if it's more comfortable for you to place the legs first, please feel free. I'm going to recline back. So I want to make sure that I have this in the correct place. So again, just beneath the shoulder blades. And then I might need to wiggle the bolster into place or kick it into place, the pillow beneath the knees. Our arms can come directly out to the sides, or they can come into a cactus position, whatever's comfortable. And we're going to continue to release, to relax here. We'll notice the support of the props. If we feel like we have too much blanket or not enough blanket, we can certainly roll off to the right or left side, make those adjustments. So we have a soft inversion here because the heart is raised above the head. We're opening through the heart space, through the rib cage, through the abdomen. If we notice some pinching in the low back here, we might choose, instead of using the bolster beneath the knees, to place the feet directly on the mat and raise the knees. And once we found a position that works for us, again, we might come back to our 3-part breath, noticing the belly fill, the ribs, the heart space. Exhaling, releasing the heart space, the ribs, the belly. And we'll be here for the next 3 minutes or so. And just an alternate option for folks who might have larger chests and who feel like maybe their chests are kind of pushed in their neck or their throat. We can also take several blankets or pillows, maybe 1 or 2. We can come into our rectangle fold, and then we'll fold that in half one more time. So it's a slightly smaller rectangle. And we can stack these on top of each other. And then come into the position the same way. But instead of the blankets going on the underside of the rib, or the underside, not of the rib, of the shoulder blade, the base will go at the underside. So the upper portion of the shoulders are supported, and the head will hang back a little bit. We want to make sure that it's supported. So if it's hanging off the ground, you can grab maybe another blanket or pillow just to place under the top of the head. And this generally will stop the chest from pushing into the throat and the chin. If we have found the second position to be more comfortable, we are free to stay here for our Shavasana. But if we've been in our rolled position and we'd like to gently roll off to the side and slowly press up, really taking our time. We want to give ourselves a minute on our side. And we can press up, remove any blocks or any props from behind us, and find our way into Shavasana or corpse pose if that's comfortable. So that would be lying directly against the mat with maybe the bolster beneath the knees. And for folks who maybe prefer a different option, we can bring our blocks into this L shape. If we don't have blocks, we can stack a few pillows or blankets, and we'll grab our bolster or our bed pillows and bring those against the support, of the blocks. And then we can bring our bum to the base of the bolster and recline against this. This allows us to be semi-reclined without laying flat on our backs. Sometimes this can be better for the low back, or if we're just congested and we need a little bit of space for things to drain. Arms can be down to the sides, it can be against the body, whatever feels comfortable. And once we've found our Shavasana, our resting pose, we'll return to the breath, noticing the inhale and exhale, allowing ourselves to again be heavy against the support, not just with the props, but the support of the earth beneath us, allowing ourselves to be held, to find rest, to be supported. We'll be here for the next 2 minutes or so. Allowing ourselves a moment to be as we are. Maybe letting the thoughts fade into the background. Not necessarily trying to push them out of the mind, but rather finding a place where they can coexist, where we're more an observer than a participant. And if that feels difficult today, we can also focus on the breath, noticing the inhale and exhale. And of course, if we like, we can stay in Shavasana for as long as we like. But if we'd rather, we might start to bring a bit of movement into the body, maybe wiggling the fingers, the toes, the head and neck. Taking any little intuitive movements that feel good in the body. If we're reclined, we might gently roll onto the right or left side, taking a few moments here. Gently pressing up into a seated position. from wherever we are, whether we're seated or reclined against our mat. We might bring the hands to heart center or place them anywhere against the body that feels good. We'll take 3 breaths together in a way that feels comfortable for us. And we'll take a moment to thank ourselves for our practice today, for making this space for rest, making this space for ourselves. And I'd like to thank you so much for sharing your practice with me today. Of course, this will stay up on the up on YouTube so that you can watch it as many times as you like. Practice whenever feels good. I do like to add a bit of a Q&A section on to the end of the lives. And this will be edited out of the forever version. So if there were any postures that maybe felt like they could use some tweaks, feel free to ask about that. Or anything else related. Happy to answer questions or offer alternative postures. So I do want to point out that one of the most important things that we've seen with COVID or long COVID, so even if you've had COVID, not sure if you're in the recovery phase from the initial infection, is that we want to take as much rest and give ourselves the opportunity to rest as much as possible, which is something else that this restorative practice is really helpful with, is that it's designating time where we have to rest. So many of us have such a hard time resting. So this really provides space for that. That's designated and official, and that can be really helpful for some of us. Kelly. Oh, I'm so glad. I'm so glad that it was helpful today. Thank you so much. Yeah, I'm hoping to bring back the nightly series on the website, fringeish.com. If not next month, then the month after. So normally I do an hour-long restorative on Sunday nights at 9 p.m., taking a little bit of a break from it. But I'm hoping to bring that back maybe in May. So we'll see that. I run my classes in series, so 4 to 6 usually in a series, and then there'll be a little bit of a break. It allows me to offer multiple options too. So the side opener was challenging for me, but I think my blanket was too big. Yeah, that can definitely be finding the right amount of support in that one. And it's something that over time, sometimes we need a little bit more, sometimes we need a little less. It depends on the day, how tight the muscles are. With restorative postures, it's always better to start with the most supported option. So if we want to make sure that we're starting basically at the lowest intensity, because as our body releases and relaxes, then we tend to find a bit more length, a bit more opening. But if we throw ourselves into a more intense version of it, sometimes those muscles can seize up to kind of support us and to keep us safe, so we don't get the opening. So I would definitely maybe a beach towel might be a good option rather than a blanket, something just a little bit thinner, but that's still firm and will offer support. That might be helpful. Side opener in general can be a difficult posture because we spend most of our days kind of in this semi-hunched computer position, or we're standing. If we I used to work retail, and we stand and we tend to kind of hunch to the side because our feet start to hurt. So we don't get a lot of stretch through the sides. But sometimes when I do teach the class, my restorative class, I'll start
with a lateral side stretch before we come into side lying stretch. So we bring one hand down to the mat, opposite arm up, and then if that feels okay, come over. And that gives us just a little bit of kind of like pre-opening for the body. And it's something we can do throughout our day. If we work at a desk, we can hold onto the side of the chair. And it just offers a little bit more opening, especially if we are dealing with long COVID, because we want to use as much of the lung capacity as possible, because some of us might end up with some fibrosis in the lungs. So we want to get to the areas where we have access, and that might not be the places that we normally use when we breathe. So a lot of these postures are about opening up and accessing and remembering what it feels like to breathe into the sides of the lungs, the back of the lungs, into the diaphragm or the bottom of the lungs. So keeping those things open can also be helpful. It took a while for me to get the courage to get down on the floor, but I'm so glad I did it. Well, I'm glad you did it too. No, it doesn't seem small. It is hard for a lot of us to get up and down off the floor, especially if we're dealing with, EF or CFS or any kind of like fatigue on a chronic basis, because you never know if you're gonna have the energy to get back up. That's one of the reasons that I offer practicing in a bed, because then you're on a platform and you can bring the legs over. You don't have to worry about expending the energy to get up and down, just to get in and out, which by itself can still be a lot depending on how many spoons we have that day. So if you have a firmer bed, the practices are a little bit better on the firmer bed. If we have a very soft bed and we're practicing in bed, we might need firmer props, or we might need a little bit more prop, because part of the prop is being pushed into the bed and not, completely supporting us. So, it takes a little bit of tweaking depending on the style of bed that you have, but that can be a really good option for low spoon days when we're not sure if we'll have the energy to push back up, or if we have knee issues too. Kelly, too much blanket was my issue with supported fish. It was a little optimistic about a comfortable back bend. I totally understand. I really have to work on less and more is more and more beneficial. When it comes to restorative postures, when we're trying to open and relax parts of the body, I just like to think of it as like, if you go to a therapist or you're talking to a doctor and you trust them, and that you've built a relationship, it's a lot easier to open up. And so our props are kind of like the foundation for that relationship. We really just want to start slow. And then once our body becomes comfortable in the position, it stops trying to hold us all together and hold us up. And we have this tendency to tighten to feel safer. And it allows us to be like, okay, we've been in this position before. We can relax a little bit now. Thank you. I love this sweater too. I had a client who gave me a H&M gift card, and I just finally got around to getting it. So H&M, they carry up to a 4X online, so that's helpful. But if you look at kind of like the series so far, the first session we really looked at opening through the back with our spinal twist. Here we're opening through the sides, we're opening through the heart space. And then we're also introducing different types of inversions. So we had Stonehenge, or legs up the wall, where we were lifting the legs above the heart, again, to help with pulmonary function. And this was a small inversion. Inversion is anytime the heart is above the head. So by lifting the rib cage, we're lifting the heart above the head. Didn't finish what you said, makes so much sense. Yeah. So a lot of what we're doing are postures that we just know help with pulmonary help with cardiac health, help with opening the lungs a bit, of getting full breaths. And remember too, with our pranayama, if we have anxiety, sometimes pranayama or breath work can feel a little anxiety inducing because, it's like, how do I know if I'm doing it right? I think the one thing that's really helpful to remember is that you can make a huge difference just by breathing in and out through the nose when that's accessible to you. And I say when that's accessible to you because if you live in a climate like I do, that's temperate, you get a lot of ups and downs in temperature, and sometimes you're really congested. But by breathing in and out through the nose, we're helping the body produce nitric oxide, which again also is a vasodilator, and it's really helpful for the cardiovascular system, as well as creating those reservoirs, which might actually help reduce the chance of contracting COVID a second or third time, because we want to avoid repeated infection as well. So yeah. But thank you all so much for joining. And if you ever have any questions about kind of like the science behind it, let me know. I have papers I can send you if you'd like to see that type of support as well. You can find me on Instagram at Fringeish, TikTok. I haven't been there for a little while, but I'm usually around. Or if you go to my website, there's a contact form and you can email, and I'll be happy to send you some of the research around COVID and all the things that I'm talking about, because I know, like, I'm not a doctor. So I want to make sure you know that what I'm doing is grounded in the research that's out there right now, that it might change as with all science. But I do hope that you're enjoying the series. Next week is our last week of the live, but all the videos will stay on the site. And I'll probably be doing another series in a few months on YouTube Live. It might be around COVID and breathwork, or it might be a gentle seated class, which would also be great for folks who want to introduce some movement but have low spoons or low mobility. So thank y'all so much for joining. I'll go ahead and let y'all get on with your day. If you came here via the website or via Facebook or the newsletter link, if you revisit this link, it'll take you to the full live with all the comments as well. But otherwise, I'm going to put an edited version up on the main feed so that it's just the practice without all the other stuff. So thank you. Have a great week. Thank you, Kelly. You too. And hopefully I'll see you all next Sunday. Feel free to go over there and hit the notify button if you like. And then you won't miss it. Or you can sign up for the newsletter on my website, fringeish.com, and you'll get the link sent to the email. So thanks. Bye. Have a great one.